Workers' World dedicates this program to Ronald Bernie Bernico in memory of his contribution as an activist to the labor movement in Cape Town. Hello, I'm Dennis Leach. The Workers' World series focuses on the world of work and issues relevant to all workers, from the struggle for a living wage to safe public transport to solidarity with workers of the world. An in-depth analysis and debate by studio panelists on the national minimum wage in South Africa. Coming to you from CTV Studios in Salt River. Workers' World starts right now.
From England to Poland, every step across the ocean, the ruling classes them is in a mess. Oh yes, the capitalist system a regress, but the Soviet system now progress. So which one of them?
Welcome to our weekly labor show, Workers' World, here on CTV. During late last year, government, business and labor agreed to a legislated national minimum wage of 3,500 rand per month for workers in South Africa. However, this will only come into effect in 2018. South Africa's levels of poverty and unemployment and low levels of wages are well known. And in today's show, we discuss whether the national minimum wage is an effective measure of uplifting the living standards of the majority of South Africans, and if so, whether 3,500 per month is enough to achieve this. Hi, I'm Ayanda Nabe. On the panel, I have Trenton Elsdy, the Director of the Labour Research Service. Hello, Trenton. And then we have Dion Simmons, Provincial Organizer of SACTU.
Evening, Ayanda.
And on screen right now, you see Johan van Niekerk, the lead negotiator for FEDUSA. Hello, Johan.
Good evening, Yana.
Before we continue the discussions of the evening, we watch this short feature prepared for us by the Workers' World Media Productions team.
Just to recap, when we started this process of the national minimum wage, it was aimed at reducing income poverty in South Africa, beginning to address the issue of inequality in our society. The panel has asked that I should put forward that magical number which they have arrived at, and they will then go into the process of elucidating it and explaining it in full. The panel are proposing that the national minimum wage in South Africa, which will have national coverage, with a few exceptions which they will deal with, should start off at 3,500 rand per month, which amounts to 20 rand per hour. What do unions desire? They desire that we should have finished yesterday. That's how eager the unions in our country are on having a national minimum wage inaugurated. Is this a living wage? Clearly, this is not a living wage. I think we need to be clear on that.
I think a person has to look at the facts. And the facts tells us that about 6 million people are currently earning less than 3,500 rand per month. And some of the lowest earned people, according to Statistics South Africa, earn a salary of 1,200 rand. Now, for those people that earn that very low salary currently, and the minimum wages would be really a blessing for them, because that will really push up their incomes to a level of 3,500 rand. or which is equivalent to 20 Rand per hour. And we, from our side, also make the point that we accept that the minimum wage is not the living wages, but I think that is a good start for us to move our people forward from here.
That is precisely the problem that we have as NUMSA, is that our members feel that 20 Rand per hour, frankly, is an insult. Not only is it not a living wage, but it's no way for a country that is serious about tackling the challenges of unemployment, inequality and poverty to deal with these serious problems. Now, the primary function of the national minimum wage was that it was supposed to deal with the problem of equality that South Africa has. Both the World Bank and the IMF have said that in order for you to improve South Africans participating in the economy, you have to raise the level of the salaries so that workers can spend money on the economy. I mean, business depends on consumers. So if you're paying people 20 Rand per hour, how on earth is the economy expected to grow? Furthermore, I just want to add that the average worker supports at least 8 dependents. Now, once again, it brings us back to this issue of 20 Rand per hour and how this is really supposed to assist our workers and their families to sustain themselves.
Johan, please explain to us, what is the national minimum wage?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I think the process really started in February 2014 with the State of the Nation address by the State President. He announces that he would like to see a national minimum wage introduced, as well as a relook at the industrial relations landscape, dealing specifically with strikes, because of the length of the strikes and of course the violence sometimes associated with strikes. There was also a need expressed by him that we look at collective bargaining as well. Then for 6 months nothing happened. We were then called to a meeting by the Deputy President, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, at Ekurhuleni, and there we reached an agreement that the social parties will gather at NEDLAC and we will start the process to debate these issues and come to an agreement. Process started, and after 13 meetings, we realized... 13. We realized that we will not reach an agreement. We then met again with the Deputy President. We expressed our concern. There was major gaps between ourselves and business, for example.
And what are some of these gaps, if you could explain to us?
Business, for example, were putting offers on the table averaging plus minus 2,000 Rand, while we were talking of amounts to the value of 4,500 Rand initially.
So when you talk about we, you talk about labour in general?
I talk about labour. I must also say that this social partners consisted out of government, labour, as well as community that form part of this grouping, also to give an input, to make sure that we cover all interested parties as part of this design of this national minimum wage. What then happened is the Deputy President decided to appoint a panel of experts. This panel of experts include local as well as international people of the International Labour Organization. And they were given a short time frame to investigate all the reports, because all the parties, including Labour, we appointed researchers to do work for us and to present us with facts so we can negotiate properly. All of these were taken into consideration, and eventually they came forward with a report with the recommendation of 20 Rand per hour, and then if you do the calculations, coming up to plus minus 3,500 Rand per month. That's the start of the process. Currently, if we look at it, we are busy with the legislation. So we are once again working against the clock to finish the negotiations, and this is the amendment of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, the Employment Equity Act, as well as the new wage bill that will eventually guide this process and legislate it properly. Our time frame is the end of August. It must be finished.
August 2017. August
2017. Finished for it to follow the process through Parliament and eventually get it signed by the President to be implemented on 1 May 2018.
And of course, one would be interested to know what are some of the content of this report that they use to calculate the 20 Rand per hour to be a feasible amount for a national minimum wage. Trenton, could you assist to that?
Look, as my friend here said, you know, business came in low, Labour came in higher, as is usually the case in these kinds of negotiations.
But one would argue even 4,000 is probably not enough.
No, certainly, but I think it benchmarked on things that exist already. So you'll find that 3.5 is very close to where median earnings are now in the economy. So the median is the one in the middle. If we line up everybody and what they earn from smallest to the biggest to the most, the one in the middle is the median, and median earnings are at around 3,500. So I think it's quite clear that, you know, it's no coincidence that the outcome is somewhere around there. So it has the potential, theoretically, half of people out there are earning 3.5 or less. So potentially it has an effect on 50% of wage earners.
50%?
It won't be the same effect on all of them, but theoretically that's possible.
I think that it's right what Trenton is saying, that we must also keep in mind that the 20 Rand per hour, that is based for the 40 hours workers are working. Significantly, what was also agreed to was that workers that are working 45 hours per week will automatically earn 3,900, and I think that fundamentally was also important when the deal was struck. I think that what was also important, the vulnerable sectors that is out there in the industries was also taken into consideration when the decision on the national minimum wage was decided on.
Sorry, when you talk about the vulnerable sectors, which ones could you be referring to?
Look, there's the clothing, textile industry, that is one. The farm workers, domestic workers is another one that is key. So these are the vulnerable workers that at this stage are still earning below 15 Rand an hour. So the deal that was struck was a very important one, seeing that the deal is also looking at the challenges of unemployment, the poverty that our communities are in, and the inequality when it comes to wages or salaries. And that was the important part. The national minimum wage, if I just can take you back.
I wanted to take us a little bit back when you come back from the refreshment break. But at home, please remember to send us your WhatsApp messages, because we'd really want to hear from you. And our number is 081 552 4551, 081 552 4551. We'd love to hear from you. Please write to us.
Workers' World continues with the national minimum wage. We'll be right back. Our topic is the national minimum wage, with our panel, Ayanda Nabe.
Well, Dion, take us back. You were talking about the issues around the national minimum wage and the 3,500.
Thank you, Ayanda. I just wanted to also add that the Low Pay Commission that was established in 1998, that's more than plus minus 17 years ago, before the commencement of the discussions on the national minimum wage started, was first introduced in April of 1999. And I think that at that stage, you know, it just died down, and you know, Johan mentioned earlier of the State of the Nation address that was held in 2014. But COSATU, as the Federation, started engaging on the national minimum wage, specifically during the period of May and March 2012-2013. And these discussions, you know, triggered a lot. That is where we are at this stage. The 3,500 Rand as a minimum is some of our sectors out there, as I've mentioned earlier, you know, are still earning much lower wages than the 3,500 that is proposed as position at the moment. So I think that vulnerable workers and the sectors will benefit from this deal that was struck between Labour, government, and, you know, where the employers is concerned. Close to 4.2 million workers in our country will benefit in 2018 from the national minimum wage.
And of course, the benefit you're talking about is that their salaries will increase, but whether they'll be able to live is a different story, right?
Yeah, if I may add with Dion, you know, if you look at the vulnerable sectors, and we look specifically at two. The one is the farm workers, which will start at 90%. Now it was 18 Rand per hour. And then, of course, your domestic workers, which will start at 75%, which means 15 Rand per hour. It's quite right. If you look at the statistics supplied to us, plus minus 51% of employees currently earn 1,200 Rand or below. And he's right, 4.2 million workers will benefit from this. Now we realize that it could be so that, specifically looking at some of the sectors which are paying far below this level, to immediately increase to 3,500 could be a problem. And therefore you will see one of the issues that we are debating currently is the exemption process. And
I'd like to hear about that exemption. Who can apply for an exemption?
Well, all the employers can apply for that. It will require that they will have to consult with the workers, and eventually they will have to submit it. The idea is that we would like to have a process very similar to the current tax system, where the employer will submit his application and almost immediately receive a response if his application has been approved.
But why would anyone want to apply for exemption? I just wanted to talk us, perhaps Shenton, you can assist. An employer applying for exemption because an employer does not want to or cannot afford this 3,500. What are some of the reasons that they can put on the table?
It's a constant struggle. Employers are always looking to, manage costs.
Of course, and using salaries to compete.
Well, yes, and I think that's why this is important. It's a modest shifting of the wage floor in South Africa. From very low levels, we talk about domestic workers earning as little as 1,800 a month, private security industry, 2,000 a month. So this
community care workers, 1,200 or less.
So this is really relatively significant, and I think it's important that it shifts the norm a little upward. It is by no means a living wage. Everybody agrees on that. In fact, it might fall short of the amount required to feed a family properly. So that's a sense of how low it is, and yet it's an important shift.
And one of the interesting things that you said earlier, Trenton, was that was to explain how it was calculated, because that's a medium. And I'm thinking in my mind, was there no other way of calculating this, understanding that even those that live along this median salary are really struggling to live, to survive, Was there no other way of calculating what would be considered a minimum, a national minimum wage in South Africa?
If I may add,
Yes, please.
It was not just accepting that the national minimum wage will be at 3,500 forever. In fact, it includes a process that it will be revised annually. And we are looking at specific guidelines to deal with this. The aim of Labour specifically is to eventually arrive very soon at a salary of 4,500 and then to move it up to 5,500, which is very close to a living wage.
And very soon is approximately how many years?
We are talking about 3 years. But as I'm saying, it's part of the debate. Currently, this is what has been put on the table by Labour, but of course, business and government must agree to the process. But we foresee to arrive there very soon.
All right, we'll come back to the discussions. We go on a short commercial at home. Please stay tuned.
You are watching Workers' World, coming to you on CTV each week at this time. You're watching Cape Town Television with our topic tonight, the national minimum wage in South Africa. Back to our panel.
And of course, to remind you at home, please send us those WhatsApp messages. We are on 081 552 4551. 081 552 4551. Send us the input and let's hear what you'd like us to discuss in this show. we were talking about the national minimum wage, and of course, one of the interesting things that you raised, Johan, was the fact that you're hoping that the minimum wage will be revised annually, and very soon it would reach 4,500 to 5,000 rand, and this will be in a couple of years, you say. But at the same time, we're still talking about the exemptions that the employers can apply for. So how do you balance these two things?
Yeah, of course, a concern to us is firstly the enforcement of that. Because if we look at the inspectorate, currently there's plus minus 1,000 inspectors in the Department of Labour, and for them now to take on this additional responsibility, it's a concern to us. We believe that, well, there will be not enough people to make sure that there's proper enforcement on this. Our approach as Labour was to say, let's look at an approach of maybe a stick and a carrot. In other words, that we incentivize employers to comply by giving them, for example, a tax incentive instead of just punishing them. Yes, there is the Basic Conditions of Employment Act with certain penalties which will be applicable, but the approach should be see if we cannot get them on board. So there will be a communication process as soon as the legislation is finalized to make sure that we get their buy-in. If we look at the process that will be followed, there is a panel that will deal specifically with the national minimum wage. This panel will be a separate panel of the Employment Commission that is currently dealing with sectoral determinations. So there is a mechanism to deal with this and to deal with processes, of course with a proper research unit giving us information so we can do a proper assessment.
And all this mechanism that you're suggesting will be discussed and finalized in August?
Absolutely, because it's part of the draft legislation and will be built in to cater for this.
Wow.
I think to add what
yeah.
Johannes said is that Labour is also interested in utilizing the current bargaining councils that are at the moment dealing with exemptions. That is similar to the process when the CCMA was established. They've also delegated bargaining councils to deal with conciliations and also arbitration. So the current bargaining councils are currently dealing with exemptions in the different bargaining councils, and it will also assist if you know these what's over the exemption applications can be done by the bargaining councils, and that is strategically important where the discussions is going to under exemptions.
And here's a very interesting input that has come in from one of our listeners, and they're saying that we have the vulnerable workers that are not accommodated by the bargaining council, and references made to the healthcare workers, and they're saying even then, so they are left out. And of course we have more input saying that unfortunately this will not necessarily improve the lives of workers, because 3,500 these days is really too little.
If I may respond to the first question, you know, everybody is included. The only people really excluded, and that is a point that we are debating as Labour, is the public works program.
But that's the point that they're raising, isn't it?
Yeah.
The healthcare workers are perceived, or rather at times when it's convenient for government, they're seen as people that falls under the EPWP program. Yeah. And so they're excluded.
Yeah, they're excluded in the view of government. In the view of Labour, we are proposing a different scenario. We are saying, let's do the same as what we are doing for the vulnerable workers. In other words, let's start at the lower trench and then move it up slowly, but make them part of this process so they can enjoy the benefits of all the employees of South Africa.
Ayanda, if I can.
Yes,
at the moment, there's no ground for the national minimum wage. And I think that this is in the right direction to lay that foundation at the minimum wage at 20 Rand an hour. And from there onwards, strategically move it, as Johannes mentioned earlier, to move it from there to reach close to that living wage that all of us as Labour are fighting for.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think once I've got a comment here, and it says that, you know, the listeners are glad that the discussions are happening. However, you really need to take care of other sectors as well, because there's a bit of insecurity, and I suppose they're speaking to those that fall under the EPWP, because reference is made to the creche workers, the healthcare workers, and those working at supermarkets, they say. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Yes, Trent.
If I may, yeah. So this essentially, in a way, creates a single benchmark where we had a relatively fragmented system of bargaining councils, sectorally based bargaining councils, a series of sectoral determinations for sectors where workers and employers are very unorganized and there are recognized to be high levels of exploitation. So this creates a single benchmark, which I think is quite important, shifts the norm up a little bit. But there are some real concerns, and I mean, I'd be interested to hear from Johan. Have they settled the question of minimum guaranteed hours of work? Yeah. Because it's one thing to say, you should earn 20 Rand an hour, you should earn 3,500 a month, but if the worker doesn't get to work all the hours required to earn 3,500, they still end up coming in under that. And we haven't even started talking about what is a decent life and how much money does that take.
In relation to what you're saying, we haven't started to discuss a decent life. I've got a comment from Linda, and she says, by the time the workers get the living wage, which is due to them, how much will a loaf of bread cost? But we'll discuss that in our next episode. At home, if you have any labor-related programs, please visit the Department of Labor centers or join a union. And remember, we at Workers World believe that Working Class United will never be defeated. Good evening, and thank you for watching. So we will have another show after this.